the final S in our Bless strategy. And I hope that you have found all these tools useful. We've got a couple more for you to begin learning how to practically live these things out and use these tools in your other efforts for praying and for welcoming people into your home and for fasting and all these things. So I want to talk about how to go from sharing my story to his story. And we want to give you some simple ways to do that so that you know how to clearly communicate what God has done in your life through Jesus, and then be able to invite somebody into how they can have a story like you do. So the first thing that we want to talk about is my story, and I want to lay out for you how to do that, and then I will demonstrate for you my own personal story. So in my story, the way that you can break this down is in 3 different parts. We're going to have a section first about your life before you really surrendered your life to Christ. So we have before Christ. And in this, you want to make some bullet points about maybe what was missing in your life, or did you struggle with some addictions, or did you wrestle a lot with being angry or not treating family members or friends well, or think about some of those kinds of things that you may have struggled with. Now, some of us may have a longer before story than others, and so you just want to break it down into some key areas that you'll be able to communicate the person that you were before Jesus came into your life. Next, you want to explain clearly how you came into an understanding of who Jesus is and you giving your life to him. And so this is how you met Jesus. And again, you want to give just some bullet points about what was going on, who shared with you, and where were you in your process. Now, some of us, it may have taken some time to come into an understanding. So maybe you learned about Jesus really young, but you didn't really surrender your life to him until you were older, and that's okay. So you just break it down in those bullet points. Finally, you want to give a clear explanation about who you are and how your life has changed since Jesus, because when he comes in our lives, he transforms us. And so we want to be able to communicate that clearly. How is your life different since you've met Jesus? Okay, so again, a couple of bullet points on what's been going in your life since then. What has your learning process been? We all learn through failing forward. We try things and maybe they don't work out. We fall. None of us are perfect, so we don't want to communicate that everything is perfect since knowing Jesus, but we want to still be able to share how maybe he's helped us to overcome difficulties in our lives or things like that. And so again, each person may have a different number of bullet points in the sections that are here. And so just work with that according to what your story is, make your bullet points, and then we want to practice sharing it so that we have this clear presentation to be able to express to other people. It's good to have a couple of different time lengths of your story because people's attention their attention span is not very long these days, and maybe you only get a minute to share with somebody your story, or maybe you get like 5 minutes to share with somebody, and you want to kind of know how to adapt your story for those different scenarios. So I'm going to break this down in my story, and hopefully you'll be able to clearly see each different section in here in about 2 minutes. So then we're going to have you practice. So my story is that I was raised in a home with a foundation about who God was from a very, very young age. And about 6 years old, I knew enough. I knew God loved me, and I knew that I wanted to live my life for him and that I needed him. And that was enough for me to be able to give my life to Christ, to surrender to Christ as much as I could understand. 6. So, of course, I had lots of growing to do after that. And I kind of developed, probably because of my personality, a little bit of a perfectionism and performance based faith instead of a relationship with God. So I grabbed hold of everything a Christian is supposed to do and not supposed to do. And that was my focus, being at church all the right times. What were the major sins I needed to avoid? And reading my Bible, but I hated reading, so I really struggled with that part. But because of that, I really became judgmental. I had a lot of inner issues in my heart. I was self-righteous. I was not loving toward other people because all I was doing was pointing out things they were possibly doing wrong, because that's how I was looking at myself. And I constantly wavered on whether or not I really was with God and was secure in that, because everything was based on my performance. So about my junior year of high school, I came to an understanding, and God challenged me in my heart about whether I was going to believe the things I was speaking and live like it, or I was just going to keep basing everything on my performance. And so I decided from that moment forward that I was not going to question my salvation, that I was going to focus on a relationship with Jesus and recognize that I cannot get right with God without Him. And the things that are coming out of my life, the obedience, is a flow from the transformation of Jesus, not me transforming myself. So since then, I have been through this growing process of trying to stop performing and really just resting in who God is, but also learning to listen to Him and be obedient to Him. And because of that, it's drawn me so much closer to Him than I ever was in all my years of knowing about God before. So I hope that was a clear example, that you saw the different parts of my story. And hopefully it was in under 2 minutes. Now we want you to take some time to practice this. It's really important to get multiple reps in when we practice, and everything else we do in life. There's repetition. We got to do it multiple times to get better, to learn how to improve, to communicate differently. What do we want to say? So the more you do it, the more confident you will become. When I first started doing this, I was very nervous to do it. And now I'm sitting here helping you learn how to do it. So that's what God does with our obedience. So take some time to work through maybe 2 or 3 reps of learning to share your story in about 2 to 3 minutes. And of course, before you do that, write your bullet points down so that you can help guide that conversation. And I just want to encourage you with this. Be okay with it not being perfect. The only way that you're going to improve is if you just try it and start working through it, and God will begin to bring it together. So take some time to practice that now. I hope that you got a little bit more confidence after practicing your story. And now, like I was saying before, we want to make sure that we know how to move to sharing His story. Because otherwise, all people will do is walk away with, okay, well, that was good for you. And they just go on about their lives. And so we need to give a clear invitation to people that God cares for them and He wants them to have a story as well. So we use a simple tool called the 3 circles. And I want to demonstrate that for you here. And again, I want to just give you some encouragement, because this comes from me who has been an introvert and did not enjoy talking to people, struggled through sharing my faith with people. But I learned this tool I'm about to teach you about 6 years ago. And I've shared the gospel with more people in these last 6 years than in all those years that I was sitting in a service and wrestling through what it looked like to live for God. So having a tool has really helped somebody, especially with a personality like mine that can't just go talk to a wall, you know? And so I encourage you with this, that the simplicity is meant so that anybody can do this, no matter their education level, no matter their personality type. And it is a filter. It's not on us. It's not on how well I present this tool. Remember, the Holy Spirit is the one doing the work in people, and these tools just help give us some handlebars in these conversations that God is inviting us to have with other people. So This tool is called the 3 circles, and you'll see why by the end of it. I'm just going to go through the presentation. I'm not going to explain each circle, so I'm just going to go through it so that you can then just go through it as well. And again, we're going to ask you to practice and get as many repetitions of this as possible so you can get confident in it. So, we live in a world that is full of brokenness. Now, that brokenness is inside of people. It's not about the world itself being broken. The things that happen are because of the brokenness inside of us. But God did not intend for the world to be as it is today, as we see it now. Originally, He had a perfect design in mind. And in that design, people and God were in perfect relationship. Everything was good and everything was whole. But we got separated from this design and are now in this place of brokenness because of something we call sin. Now, sin is just anything that we do, we think, we say that is not in line with God's will. So we ended up in this brokenness, but God didn't want to leave us there. He created us for a reason. He created us to be in relationship with Him, and He loves us very much. So He wanted to give us a way back to Him, but we can't do that ourselves. We can't just become unbroken. We can't become perfect again on our own. So He sent us a hero, and that hero is Jesus. And Jesus came down to do all the things that we can't do. He came down and lived a perfect life on the earth. He died on the cross, taking the place and the punishment for us and for our sin. He was buried in a tomb, so He actually did die, but He didn't stay there. 3 days later, He came back to life, and after some time, He went back up to be with the Father, and He's promised us that He's going to come back one day. So that is really good news. But we can't just believe that Jesus came and did these things. We can't just believe He existed and actually was a man. God says there's 2 things that we have to do in order to be restored to His perfect design. We have to be willing to turn from our sin that has us in brokenness, and then we have to follow Jesus. And we have to let Him become the boss or the king of our lives. And when we do that, God's promise is that we are immediately restored to His perfect design, because the design is about being in the relationship. Now, as a result of that relationship, He helps us to grow. Because we can't do it on our own, and we can't work our way into this perfect design. So He will help us learn what it means to follow Jesus, learn more about who He is, learn more about who we are. You heard Guy talk about our identity being new creations. And so that's important for us to know and begin to learn how to live in. Also, God has commanded us to go back to our friends, our family members, our neighbors, our communities who are still in brokenness, to share with them that God has a design and desires to be in a relationship with them. And He wants us to be the ones to go and share that. That is His chosen method to reach people. So there's only 2 places that you can be. You can either be near to God in His perfect design, or far from Him in brokenness. So the question would be, which of these 2 circles would you place yourself in? So that's the tool itself. Now, there are some conversations about follow-up and asking questions about where they want to be. But this is the tool, and we want you to take some time to practice this. Again, the more repetitions you do, the more confident you will become. And so it's very important for all these things that we're talking about. If we don't do it, we're going to forget. We're not going to be comfortable using them. We're not going to know how to fit it into conversations and be authentic. This is not about being rigid and following a formula. It's just to give us a guide in conversations. And so the only way to get comfortable is to do it. Practice it on your own, but then go out and do it. And so we're about to allow you time to practice this now, but I encourage you, take your community groups, maybe in addition to the prayer walking that you have done, go out and look for opportunities to share with people on the street. Share with your neighbors. Share with people that you've identified in your life who you know are far from God. And that will help you to become confident and competent in these tools and learning how to share your story and His story.